Hi guys, here we are again. It's the Street Soccer United podcast with me, Keith Mabbott, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Adrian Dante. Adrian is a partner at Opus Restructuring, an amazing supporter of the foundation, has been for a number of years. Hi guys, here we are again. It's the Street Soccer United podcast with me, Keith Mabbott, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Adrian Dante. Adrian is a partner at Opus Restructuring, an amazing supporter of the foundation, has been for a number of years. So it's really good to sort of tie you down, mate, this morning, and obviously have a good chat with you and catch up. For the benefit of those that come across this, though, the purpose of the podcast, which hopefully a lot of you know now, is to get an insight into some of our supporters, you know, their kind of upbringing, their sort of day-to-day activities, what they get up to, how they got into what they do, and obviously a little eye towards the future as well, and any kind of insight and advice they might be able to give on the way to sort of that journey. So Adrian, it's really good to see you. If you don't mind, obviously I've given you the title, as it were, but do you want to just give you a little sort of introduction for the benefit of our viewers? Give yourself a little intro, you know, about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, certainly, yes. Adrian Dante, as you say, I'm a partner in Opus Restructuring. By profession, I'm an insolvency practitioner. So by definition, that means dealing with businesses and individuals that are in financial difficulty. Our goal is to try and help these businesses, turn them around, restructure them. But if we can't, then we try and find a clean exit out of the business so things don't get any worse for them. Of course, it's a bit of a hot topic at the moment, post-pandemic, as the government measures ease. Our profession is now coming to the fore.
Brilliant. And in that, I think a few of the guys that will come across this, they may not have even heard of the term insolvency, but you described it well in that regard. And I think, but before we kind of sort of talk about your day-to-day stuff, we'll reel you back. Hopefully, it won't be too many years. I don't want to sort of give an insight into the age, but so, your sort of background, Adrian. So am I right? You grew up in the Medway. You went to school in Chatham, or Chatham as they call it, because I was born in Chatham, so I know
just like you. I was born in Chatham in 1969. Yes, I went to St Michael's, the infant school there. Then, as a family, we moved from Chatham to Rainham in 1976, and then I'm a Roman Catholic, and obviously went to St Thomas's in Twiddle, and then on to St John Fisher in Chatham from 1981 to 1986. And I left school at that point, and I did a bit of work on the picking strawberries, and over in Upchurch, and then to get some money to go up to London and get some interviews. And I found myself doing an office junior job in the insolvency department of a firm of chartered accountants on Fleet Street, and that's how it started for me. On the day before my 17th birthday. That's
so brilliant. I didn't know actually about you that you'd done the old fruit picking effort as well. Who hasn't done that? Maybe not
Absolutely.
So much these days, but back in the day, everyone had a go at that, didn't they?
Definitely, easy money.
I had grand plans for that though, Adrian. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, but I signed up to do a fruit picking thing over a summer, and I was sort of 2 day. I'd planned like the whole sort of 4 or 5 weeks, and how much I was going to earn.
Yeah.
My second day, I got basically asked to leave because I was like, what I was trying to do is where you had to pour it into all the punnets. I was just pouring. I went on the second day with like a triple XL shirt, which I didn't really care about, and just poured all the fruit into the t-shirt like this, like a big coat, and then just poured them all out over the punnets. But obviously half of them got bruised. So when I got inspected, they were saying, "This is ridiculous. You may as well leave."
This is not for you.
So with your schooling then, so were you kind of academic? Were you kind of studious at school, or?
No, I was very average. I was very much treated school as very much a social time. I loved going to school. I think I never played truant, and I kind of like, on looking back in the job I do now, I think my skills were kind of like out of school, because as I say, I was very much a social person and at school. And then obviously when I went into the big world of the big bad world of 86 or 87. So but what I did, I kind of matured a little bit later. When I got to 18, 19, I went to night school. So I learned O-level accounts. I went on to do A-level accounts at night school. I went to do A-level law at night school. So I kind of matured later in life. So that's why I know nowadays there's so much pressure on young people. But you know, whatever happens, you know, if things don't go your way, you know, first time around, it's not the end of it. You know, there's plenty of time in the future. But I do understand the pressures of school and education now. Perhaps, you know, a bit different back then, of course.
What made you go to night school though, Adrian? Was that like people around you guiding you on that and advising you that it would be a good thing to do? Yeah.
I mean, I realised I was in a bit of a numbers game. It was a firm of accountants. You know, I was, as I say, at school, I always did enough just to get by. But I knew, you know, when I got to 18, 19, I knew that if I wanted to carve out a career in insolvency, you know, in a professional environment, then I would need to actually learn some core skills. You know, going to learn, you know, the accountants laughed at this. You know, the first thing I learned was where there's a debit, there must be a credit. You know, and that was it. And I always remembered that. But then, of course, as time went on, and I moved on to a niche firm in the early 90s when there was a big recession on, I kind of like learned on the ground, and I had to sort of like, you know, learn from a sort of a standing start. You know, going out to businesses that were in trouble, meeting employees that were on the brink of losing their job. And it was all about people skills. You know, you can't teach it. You know, it's like my boss at the time, she said, Adrian, just remember, you're dealing with real life people in real life situations, you know, and I kind of like, that's where I kind of learned a lot. And I learned a lot about people, and I learned a lot about how businesses worked and how they failed as well, and the consequences of that. So on the background, I was learning accounts and law. But at the same time, I was building up experience, like dealing with these businesses and troubled directors and business owners.
Yeah, and earlier you said about so was it you were 17 before you went up to London to get like?
I actually started interviews at 16, and I started work on the day before my 17th birthday, 9th of September 1986. It was daunting, but I kind of felt I was kind of ready. Even though I was so young. But I just had a.
Why London?
I just had a bit of a personality.
Why London?
It just attracted me. Yeah, I don't know. It just attracted me. It attracted me. The big city attracted me. You know, and I didn't want to work locally. I wanted to get right there. I think what it was. I think I was quite, as I say, in terms of social skills, I was quite mature for my age. Even though academically I could have done a lot better, but I think I spent more time socialising at school than I did anything else. But as I say, as years went on, then you start to mature a little bit more, and you start meeting some of your superiors, and you think, okay, I want to try and see now if I can actually forge a career out of this.
And where did it come from? Like the interest that you had? Was it like, were your mates kind of discussing the same sort of things to get into, or where? I mean, did you know someone who was in the industry? Didn't know anything about anything.
I applied. I applied through the Capital Job Finder, which was Capital Radio. It was for young people, and they said, "Oh, there's a position here at in the insolvency department of a firm of accountants." I thought I knew insolvency was something to do with like debt, but I didn't. So I actually looked it up, definition, and they actually asked me in the interview if I knew what I meant. I gave the definition, so I think they impressed them straight away. It's a bit like what they say now, do some research on the firm and the people, which is obviously difficult back then because you didn't have the internet or anything like that. So all I knew a little bit about the firm of accountants, and I kind of like, I think I asked a couple of people that were, my mum and dad knew about the firm of accountants in London, the big firms at the time, KPMG when they were a different name. And so I kind of thought, I knew that it was like, insolvency was to do with like, as obviously very quickly, that it was companies that are getting financial difficulty and going to receivership back as it was back then, administration, liquidation. And of course, as time has gone on, that's evolved now because now you have restructuring and you have turnaround and debt refinancing, all that sort of thing, which all kind of encumbers everything to do with corporate recovery and insolvency.
Yeah. And interest. I mean, I'm just wondering here though. Did it come from partly an interest in like basically wanting to help people, like where they've come
Yeah.
into a situation that they're really struggling financially as a business, like you say, but ultimately they're people making up a company, and then you're coming in to try and kind of virtually put your arm around them and say, look, let's try and work this out. How can we make this better for you and turn
There's
it
very
around?
much of that. Absolutely. I was very much of that ilk growing up. I was very much, I did like helping people in certain situations. I was very, I always felt the need to help people. I mean, part of my background, as you know, my brother had severe learning disability and challenging behaviour, which kind of like had a big impact on my life growing up. So I kind of, my parents didn't tell me how lucky I was, but I knew myself that I could have. What happened to him? He had a lack of oxygen when he was born, so brain damaged him. And of course, back then in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, they used to put you in mainstream school. Of course, he couldn't cope with any of that, so it's very difficult for him. But I was kind of like taking it all in as a child, and my parents often used to think that I was kind of left behind, and I had to get on with it myself because they had to spend so much time with him, and honestly, they took up a lot of their time. And I think I was kind of like, that's where I think I got my kind of understanding of like there are people out there that are a lot worse off than what you are, whether it's from a mental point of view, a physical point of view, or and as I learned as I've grown older, financially as well. So I think that's all born from my family life, and it's not. People have said to me, it's no surprise that you've ended up in a profession that actually helps businesses and directors and individuals in financial difficulty. So I think that's probably where it comes from.
Yes, I mean, I was personally aware of that, and really appreciate you sharing that, Adrian. And just really like touch on it briefly though. But was in that regard, then with the sort of family unit, was it often quite a challenging thing for you as an individual in terms of like you're saying, like the parental kind of aspect often, respectfully, wasn't often there because of that demand, and so you was kind of having to charge your own direction and make your own decisions. Is that probably fair, mate? And
yeah, and actually, my mum, especially, she was a midwife for most of her career, but she was aware of me in the background, and she always said, she goes, I used to worry about Adrian, like and his development, which is probably why being at school, my parents didn't really push me that hard because like I think they were grateful that they because obviously what was the situation with Martin and his disability, how challenging that was, how demanding that was. I think I kind of like learned to sort of like, but I don't regret it. I don't, I wouldn't point the blame. I wish they'd done that, because I think it kind of shaped me to the person I am today.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you know this about me, but only kind of very, very brief sort of kind of similarity, but only in the sense of my upbringing. So my mum and dad split when I was very young, and I've got a younger sister, and I kind of, in theory, it's very different, mate, and I'm very respectful of that. But just in terms of growing up and making decisions quite early on, that was me kind of, at sort of 6-7 years old, I was then taking responsibility for my sister, who was 3 years younger. And my mum was working 2 jobs to support the family, so I was laying the table, all at 6-7 years old, going to meet my sister, bring her home, lay the table. Growing up really quickly, saying no to a few of my mates, staying indoors, playing in the garden, doing basically doing kick-ups in the garden on my own all afternoon. But it's that, and then it's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Basically, I matured really quickly and grew up very quickly and became independent at a very young age, and I guess that's in my brain where I relate to what you've just said in terms of that independent mindset, I guess, and making your own decisions and sort of making.
That's right, and you make your own errors as well, and you didn't, rather than bleat about it or kind of like point the finger, you kind of like deal with it yourself, and deal with other situations that maybe in this day and age people would reach out, and rightly so, especially in the current climate, with mental health, etc., etc. But I kind of like, the errors that I made and the decisions I made, and sometimes, was that the right thing to do? But I kind of like worked it out for myself quite quickly. That I think, perhaps this is what I ought to do. It just takes a little bit of advice as well from elders and parents and so forth. But I think I kind of learned to sort of like stand on my own 2 feet quite quick, and I kind of learned as I went along. It was like a trial and error type thing, and I think a lot of young people now, I think if they would say to me that if it's in the say, I say to you, look, And there is obviously a lot of help out there now. Perhaps back then it wasn't the help there is that there is today, or the awareness, should I say?
Yeah.
Probably another key word really to, or the awareness compared to what's around now.
Yes, it's really, really fair. And I think you're absolutely right, mate. Obviously, it's a lot more open and getting ever more open with people discussing both their physical and mental health. And obviously, we come across it quite a lot with the young people that come onto our programs. You know, that they've had a bit of a tough time, generally speaking. And you know, fundamentally, we're there. Like the purpose of this, like, you know, with your great involvement on this right now, Adrian. You know, it's having discussions, and ultimately discussions, you learn and you know, you create a support network, but an educational one at that. And that kind of learning process, they can hopefully take on board and execute on those learnings to change their lives for the better and you know, improve their prospects. And I think, you know, it comes down to number one all the time. You can offer support and encouragement and advice to an individual, but they have to do something about it. And, you know, you make your own decisions. And I think when you wake up in the morning, that's where it starts. You know, you make decisions and choices throughout the day, every single day, that affect outcomes. And whether that then reinforces certain beliefs and this, that, and the other, you just got to be really mindful of your thought processes, you know, and what's going on in your mind. So reaching out to
absolutely right.
Not a bad thing at all. And you know, with I guess in one way, we're fortunate that support network is there and ever greater now. So, but no, thanks for sharing that. And kind of now, so in the role that you're doing, I mean, what does it look like? I mean, again, coming to like the guys that might come across this video and this show, could you give an insight into what your kind of industry is and what it looks like, and how might people be able to make their first start, you know, and getting into this kind of world, you know, to try and help others? But if they've got a kind of way with numbers, perhaps maybe, how could they get started in this kind of field?
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. I mean, it's not I wouldn't advise anybody now to go straight into the insolvency profession, because I think now, because it's so wide ranging, what I alluded to earlier, I think now that young people will go into an accountancy practice and hone their skills and learn, you know, whether it's audit, tax, VAT, but then they kind of like, they might get seconded onto a project, a turnaround or restructuring projects, and they're dealing with, like, you know, businesses that are failing, that need restructuring, turn around. They go, oh, I like this. I like the interaction with the, you know, with the director or the workforce or the etc. Which, as an auditor or doing tax, you wouldn't necessarily have to do that. So it's very much, you know, the skill set, as I said earlier, is very much, you've got to have people skills and you've got to have a bit of personality as well. Of course, there are number crunchers that sit in the back office, and every organisation needs that. So, I mean, if anybody wanted, it's not a sort of career that you go through. They'll talk to you at school about. They will put that in the bracket of either law or accountancy. So, insolvency and restructuring is like a spin-off of both of those professions, if you like, because obviously you've got insolvency, you know, obviously different types of law, and you can become an insolvency lawyer, you know, specialising in restructuring and insolvency litigation, i.e., you know, pursuing delinquent directors that have been, shall we say, you know, economic with the truth. I mean, this is a podcast, so I'll be careful what I say, but I think you get the gist of it. But yeah, so I think young people now, if they, you know, the young people coming into the restructuring profession, I think they're not coming necessarily directly into it. They're coming through like the accountancy side of it, and they're adding like a few strings to their bow. One of which is learning how to be involved in a restructuring of a business, and that might mean having to trade on a business in administration or receivership, which is obviously taking control. I mean, you're actually, the administrator is in control of that business. That means they've got to make decisions very, very quickly, and that means they've got to have a team around them. You know, whether it's professional agents advising on valuation, obviously lawyers advising on the legal aspects, but also it's you've got to have commercial skills. That's the most fundamental skill that you have to develop. You can't really learn that in a classroom. You can only learn it on the job with the people that are there already, the experienced people. And that's how I learn, you know, making commercial decisions. Not necessarily the right decision. If you make a wrong decision, you can correct it. It's not a matter of, you know, but if you make a wrong decision, then you can correct it quite quickly, or you can seek advice for it.
And what would you say, like in layman's terms, what is like what are commercial skills in a definition purpose? Like what
I mean, in terms of a business environment, making decisions on taking on a project or contract, working out whether or not it's going to be profitable or not. Can we get enough equipment? Can we get enough stock or whatever it is to make that, to turn that into profit, etc., etc. And it's then making decisions about restructuring the business in terms of its financials, whether or not you're going to have to make some tough decisions in reducing costs. That means maybe talking to the workforce, that you may have to reduce costs in that area, or non-profitable sides of a business you may have to close down or wind down. And these are all tough decisions, all commercial decisions. You can't, they're not in a book. You've got to be able to sit and look at that and say, look, I think we're going to start losing money on this aspect, and we're going to have to think about maybe reducing costs on that side of the business in order to make this side of the business, and to be able to turn it back to profit, and maybe to be able to sell it as what we call a going concern to a potential buyer. That's probably it, really. I mean, it's having a commercial, it's having a kind of an open mindset of whatever decision you make. It's not going to be black and white. There's going to be a situation where it may not be the right decision, but then you can look at it again and say, right, okay, we've gone down that road. Let's look at it again from another commercial point of view. We'll talk to somebody about that, etc., etc. And that's how you sort of can't reach these commercial decisions.
On a serious, Adrian, I mean, I think what you do is it's so important, because again, ultimately, it affects people's livelihoods, people's jobs and everything else, and
family life.
Exactly.
Impacts all the way down.
Yeah, putting food on the table.
I mean, the hardest part of our job is when we have to stand in front of the workforce, when we've had the meeting with the board.
I've lost you, Adrian, in a minute. Got a lovely letter.
Face them. We have to tell them that sadly that your contracts of employment are terminated as of today, and the business is today. Now, 20 years ago, we used to get a lot of emotion. Nowadays, kind of employees, they can feel it. They know what's going on. They can see what's happening. There's less orders coming in. The directors are not around as much. They can feel the business is not working properly. So it doesn't come as a major shock, but it still comes as a shock because the first thing that comes into the head is like, am I going to get paid? And we always say, your wages will be paid at the end of the week or end of the month. That is so, or especially when we trade on a business, it's business as usual. We will continue to pay, and whilst we're here, so all they want is reassurance. And of course, the government, there's obviously the government compensates them for redundancy, paying them notice, and arrears of wages. So there is that obviously backdrop, but obviously it's their immediate thought that, oh, I've got to go home and face my family. I've got to pay this. I've got to pay that. That is the toughest. And we've tried to have so much empathy, and coupled with patience, but professionalism as well. We have to be professional, and we speak to them on their level. It's so important.
Yeah, it is. Like you say, I mean, the outcome of your work is going to either save or unfortunately, it's going to be a message that is going to affect people in a tough way. And I think obviously coming through this dare I say the word, but this pandemic, and that must have been extremely challenging as a period for you. I mean, was it reading between the lines? Did you have more often? Was it kind of negative news, unfortunately, rather than
unfortunately?
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, during the last 12 months, we've had lots and lots of inquiries. It's been much. I describe it as it's like a hand holding. There's a lot of businesses had to stay closed, and they think, well, can we open? And I said, well, if you open up, that means you start incurring liability. It's you've had your bounce back loan, you've had other support measures, but now what the difficulty now is that now we're emerging from the pandemic. Businesses are opening up all the time. Of course, at the moment there's uncertainty as well, with the immediate future, and a lot of businesses are concerned about whether or not, for example, some employees may have to go back home and work from home again. But we'll have to wait and see on that. But what I'm seeing at the moment is good businesses, but they're carrying a lot of debt, And what our job is to help those businesses to keep going, but to try and restructure those businesses over the longer term and repay or compromise over that debt, either through refinancing or through an insolvency procedure.
Yeah. I mean, all power to you, Adrian. I'd say genuinely, it's brilliant work that you're doing. It's a skilled profession, and I think, you know, fundamentally where you're helping people and saving people in instances, it's a superb situation.
Okay.
It's a real good insight, Adrian. Thank you so much for that. So I mean, in terms of kind of coming out this pandemic and looking ahead and being kind of positive towards the future wherever possible, what would you kind of sort of say is on your mind at the minute? What have you got planned ahead for the next sort of 6 months, 12 months, and how do you approach that time period ahead of you? Is there certain challenges that you know you're going to come across, or is there certain goals that you want to go after?
Well, I mean, just very quickly, I just want to say, despite what I do, it's not all doom and gloom. Like, you know, there's some great businesses out there. And we've just seen from the Keyboard Awards that have just been announced, you know, some of the businesses have absolutely done superbly well, you know, despite the, you know, everything's been thrown at them and during this pandemic. But as for the future, I mean, the future is still very positive. You know, they're still very, very positive. I've got young teenage daughters. My eldest Lucy, you know, she's at Canterbury University. My youngest Katie, she's just starting on the road of doing a GCSEs this year. Went to look at sixth form colleges, etc. So there's a lot of positivity, I have to say. You know, I think it will take time, but I think what it is, what people have got to do, if they can just communicate, you know, if they can communicate with each other and reach out. That's what I keep saying. You know, really, really try. There's plenty of help out there. I'm not talking about non-prison, just generally. But from my point of view, I mean, of course, you know, it's difficult to predict, you know, because we've not been in this situation before. Normally, when an economy emerges from a recession, you know, the economy starts to pick up. In fact, historically, that's when the insolvencies get more busier. But this is quite something quite unique. So it's very difficult to predict the future, especially with the backdrop of everything, you know, from the Brexit and obviously the pandemic. And so, I mean, all I can say is that for young people, there is a great future in front of you. It doesn't necessarily have to be in this country either. You know, there's a whole world out there. You know, and I think, you know, if I could start again, I wish I had tried my skills abroad. I don't know what's gone, but yeah, that's all I can.
I think London is in itself, even now, still so very different to Kent and areas of Kent. Yeah. And the fact that you made that leap at just 16, 17 says so much about you as an individual, and you know, the way you've obviously had to grow up quite quickly, and you know, the mindset that you've had to apply yourself to both what you do professionally and socially, and you know, the way we came across and met each other in the first instance, and the work of the foundation obviously resonated with you, which is brilliant, and we've since then got to know each other, mate.
Absolutely. So, I mean, just that's a good point, actually. I mean, we absolutely, you know, absolutely. And I say to young people, I say, we was your age once. We was your age. I know the world's different. I know, you know, we're engulfed with social media, but we were faced with decisions and challenges back then. You know, it was obviously, you know, we didn't have what we have now, but we had the same issues as what you had. It's just obviously there's a different sort of backdrop now. And so that's what I say, young people. I say, listen to the people that have been there before. Because we were young once, we were teenagers once, you know, and you know, and for people like me, a long-suffering Gillingham fan, you know, life just goes on. Life just goes on. You know,
I was waiting for you to drop that in at some point. I wasn't going to offer it out.
You know what? Our time will come. You know, Bournemouth were. You know, I tell you, Bournemouth were 10 minutes away from going out to the Football League in 2009, and 10 years later they become £100 million a year football club. So there's hope for us yet.
And what a way to finish, Adrian. Honestly, it's been brilliant. Really,
it's been a pleasure, Keith. Great talking to you. It's always good to catch up, and we look forward to catching up with you in person soon.
Yeah, definitely, mate. Thank you again. So that today's been Adrian Dante, partner at Opus Restructuring, massive support of Street Soccer Foundation, really valued. So thanks again for your time, Adrian.
Thanks, Keith.
And we'll catch up soon. Cheers.
All the best. Thank you. Bye.